Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Modeling Minecraft. In this episode we're going to take a look at one of the most requested topics, which is animated block models. Now before we begin, I will say that this tutorial is for the more advanced users, so make sure you brush up on your knowledge of animated textures and how to create block models if you want to have a go at this yourself. So first of all, let's have a look at some finished animated block models just to see what they'll look like in the end. The animals on the right were all done for the We Are the Rangers map, and these were all created using a manual sort of technique. The same goes for Saria, which is for the Legend of Zelda map. And then we have this scorpion, which was made by Vanilla Burp for our upcoming collaboration map. And this was made using an automatic technique or using a generator. And I'll talk a bit about what I mean by manual and automatic techniques later on in the video. I'll also leave a link to the teaser video for our upcoming map on Vanilla Burp's channel and the download for the We Are the Rangers map. So anyway, now let's talk a bit about what animated block models actually are. Simply put, they're just like any other block model, except they use one or more animated textures to simulate moving elements. In other words, if you remember back to episode 6 of Modeling Minecraft where we talked about textures, you'll remember that certain blocks have full transparency support, certain blocks don't have any transparency support, but all block models or item models on an entity, such as an armor stand, which all of these are on, will always have full transparency support. So you can see it with the rhino over here. It's actually a black wool model on an armor stand's head slot, and it appears that these elements are actually moving. But if I go ahead and place this black wool, and black wool doesn't have transparency support, you can actually see where the different elements actually are. So I've used multiple animated textures to make the sort of texture go disappear and reappear at certain times, and this sort of simulates the movement. So now that you understand a bit more about how the animated block models actually work, we can talk about the differences between manually animated block models and models that have been animated using a generator automatically. So first of all, let's start with manually done animated block models. You'll usually start with a stationary block model and decide which sort of elements you want to animate. In this case, just the legs. Now I chose to have 5 frames for each leg, and since all the legs are basically doing the same thing, I only needed a total of 5 animated textures. So then you'll have to go through the process of animating those 5 textures, creating the meta files for them, and then creating the 5 elements for each leg, making sure they're positioned in the correct place and they all line up, and then applying those animated textures to each of the elements. Now obviously this would take a fair amount of time and is usually a lot slower than just doing it with a generator, but it usually produces a more efficient outcome. You can see here with this model, only the legs actually have those animated textures, you can tell by the blackness, but the top is all just using standard textures, and so you would create a lower file size model using a manual technique. With the automatically sort of generated models, you can see that the whole thing is flashing, and that's because what the generator does is it takes whole models and then basically puts them together with one whole animated texture. But it does this all automatically, so it does save a lot of time. So in this case, you would start off with, say, this model here. You would move the legs, export it as JSON, move the legs a bit more, export as JSON, move the legs a bit more, export as JSON, and then put all the things into the generator, and it would have all of it done for you. Now obviously this creates a bit of a bigger file size, but at the convenience of not having to do it all manually. So now that we've got the explanation part of the video out of the way, we can get on to actually doing the tutorial. And for this, we're going to need something to animate. So we're going to use a mini version of myself. So here we are inside Cubic Pro, and we're going to test out the 2 different methods of animating block models, and we're going to use this model here as our test subject. and we're going to do both methods and just sort of compare them at the end. So we're going to start with the manual technique. So you can see here I have different elements for all the arms and the legs and everything, and I've got one texture which is just my player skin, and I've done the necessary UVs to line it up with my sort of skin and all that, so that's all nice. So first of all, we have to think about what we're going to animate. In this case, I think we'll have the legs moving just one frame in each direction, so a total of 3 frames, 1, 2, 3, and then it will go back to the other ones as well. So technically 1, 2, 3, 4 frames, but you'll see how we can minimize that in a second to just 3 animated textures. And then the arms will do the same thing, so 1, 2, 3, 4, and then back to the start. And we'll try and get them all moving together. So let's start with doing the animated textures. So we're going to go into our texture folder here, into the resource pack that I've got this saved in, and we're going to open our skin texture in GIMP, and we are going to create the animated texture. So we're going to need this to be 4 times taller than it is at the moment. So 4 times 64 is 256. So we change the canvas size to 256. Let's actually make this full screen. There we go. Okay, so if you think of the arm here, there are 2 frames where it is in the sort of middle. So there's this frame where it's outwards, that frame where it's in the middle, that frame where it's outwards, and this frame where it's in the middle again. So there are 2 frames where it's in the exact same position. The first frame, we'll call it the first frame, is here, and then second frame here, third frame here, fourth frame here. So first frame is at the start, and what we're going to do is actually duplicate this, move it down 1, and then down 1 again. So that's the first frame where it's in the middle, that's the second frame where it's in the middle. So we're actually combining the 2 into the same one, just to save on creating too many animated textures. So we're going to export that as animation 1, we'll call it that. And now we're going to delete that frame and just move on to the second frame, which is here. Export that as animation 2. And then lastly, put this right at the bottom as animation 3. So we actually only have 3 animated textures, and since we're using a whole sort of skin file for this, we only need those 3 for both the legs and the arms actually, so that's great. So we can discard all of that, and now we're going to go back in here, and I've just copied this lava flow animated meta file because we're just going to use that, it saves us time. So we're going to call this animation1.png, then copy it, call it animation2.png, and then animation3.png. And in this case the frame time is 3 ticks, which should be enough. We'll change it if necessary. But now all we have to do is import the different animated textures, so animation 1, animation 2, and animation 3. So now all these legs and arms are going to need animation 1 as their main texture. So let's get, it's this element, this element, this element, and this element, and we're going to do textures, customize, and we're going to change it to animation 1, hit Control C, Control V, Control V, Control V, Control V, Control V, and then we're going to duplicate these and change the position of them. So this is where it gets sort of fiddly, so we're going to clone that. We're going to move it out of the way for a second and move it forwards, and then try and position it in the right place. So there should be good. Maybe I'll move it up a bit higher. There, that looks okay. Move it back a bit more. Okay, yeah, that looks okay to me. And then we're going to do the same with the other arm. So duplicate that, move it like that, and then try and line it up with the other one. It should be lined up more or less. And then we'll do the legs. So duplicate that one. Actually, I messed up. This arm should be backwards. My bad. So let's try and figure out where this one will go. Move it up a bit more. Okay. And now we're going to do the same thing with the legs. So the legs... this is how it's a bit more time consuming. You have to think about everything and how the multiple elements sort of go together. So in this case we want... yeah, that's right. Okay. I know what I'm doing now. So we're going to move that there, and we're going to do the other leg and move it backwards and put it there. Okay, so now you can see that we have the next frame done. So what we're going to do is highlight all of them and then set the textures, customize, and then change that to animation 2. Paste that for all sides, and then you'll see it'll disappear. Oh, I changed the wrong one. Oh dear. Okay, well let's move that one out. Let's move that one back. Now I gotta redo this one. Okay, that looks fine. And now for the other side, so we're going to duplicate this again and try and align it to that other pink arm. That looks aligned. Yep. And then duplicate this one and move it like this. Align it like that. And then do the same with the legs. And then this one. Okay, and then we'll grab those 4 and then change the textures to animation 3. And that should be our model done. I might have made a few mistakes, so let's check. So we're going to export it as, we'll just call it spruce leaves for now. We'll go back in game and we will reload textures by pressing F3 and T. There we go. So here we have our spruce leaves. And then we have it. Our moving little character. It's kind of cute. Let's put it up there. So yeah, obviously not perfect. I did this in kind of a rush, just to not take too much time. But you can see it, you know, it's an animated block model. That's how you do it manually. Obviously I would have tried to line them up a bit more carefully than I did in the video. You can see the legs kind of look weird, but it works. And now we're going to do this with the automatic technique, which is kind of easier. So let's do that. So here we are back in Cubic again, and I reverted the model back to how we had it at the start, just so we can compare how long it takes us. So for this, it'll be really pretty simple to do. So we're going to export this as our first frame. So we'll call it player 1. We'll export it to the desktop just to be safe. And we'll actually export it as player 3 as well, because it's going to be our third frame. Then we need to move the arm forwards 1. Let's hide the body so we can find the other arm. I'm going to move this back a bit and up like that. Then we'll move the other arm, move it down so it's sort of more in line. Then we have to move this leg back. Move it down a bit, then move this leg like that, move it up a bit, move it up a bit more just so they don't look so weird. I'm actually going to move them inwards a bit as well, just so they don't collide as much. Okay, so that looks good. So we're going to export that as our player 2 texture, or player 2 model rather. I'm actually going to Can we not go back? Okay, we can't go back. So let's just position that in the same place as the purple one, and we will move this like that. The good thing about this technique is you can really easily see where the different elements on the model are, so you can really sort of visualize how it's going to look, and it's generally a lot easier to do. So let's move that one there now, and that one like that. Let's move it up a bit more, and let's move that up a lot more. Oops. Bit more. Okay. And that's going to be our 4th frame there, so we're going to call it player 4. And that's pretty much all you have to do. So now we're going to go ahead and open the generator, and it's really simple with the generator. So here we are in the animated model generator, and this is created by Fizzy81. A link to this will be down in the description. And it comes in the form of a web page, but it can be used offline as well. So here it says load frames, so we're just going to choose our JSON files. In this case it's on my desktop, so we have player 1, new frame, player 2, new frame, player 3, and finally player 4. Then we're going to choose the textures, so we're going to choose going to the resource pack, assets, Minecraft, textures, skin, and is just the player skin. Then we'll press copy to all, because that's the same texture it uses. You can actually use more than one texture now with the version 1.2 of his generator, which is a big relief, because that's one of the things that I had a problem with in his previous version. You could only use one texture, but that's been fixed now, so that's awesome. And now we're going to go and hit settings, and you can see here it says loaded 4 frames, and we're going to change the duration of each frame actually. So we're going to change it to 3 like the other ones. Now the cool thing about this is you don't actually have to make any of the animated textures yourself. You just choose how long you want each frame to last and everything like that. So we're going to call our model name, sure, player 1 is fine, and we're going to replace birch leaves. Then click finish, and it's generated the whole thing for you. So you're going to download the model, the texture, and the MC meta file. And then all we have to do is place them in the appropriate place. So in this case we need to place this in the models for the birch leaves. Oops, come on, there we go. And in the textures for the texture file, which is here, and the MC meta file, which goes with the texture. There we go. Now we can go back into Minecraft, reload the textures using F3 and T. Oh, and it has an error. Okay, that's not great. Let's try and look at the birch leaves. Okay, so the problem is that it's trying to choose the texture from blocks / player 1, but I've placed it in a different place. I've placed it in textures skin player 1. So obviously make sure you place it in the right place. I can just change that, press save, reload the textures again, and it should all work. So there we have it. Now that we've fixed that problem with the texture being in the wrong location, we have 2 animated block models. They both look pretty much the same. They just use different techniques. The only problem with the look of the automatically generated model is there's a slight sort of jitteriness. I don't know if you can actually see it, but there is definitely a slight jitteriness of the texture. And I'm not sure if that's just because I used a relatively large texture or what. It definitely doesn't happen with the manually done one. So that might be worth Fizzy looking into. I'm not entirely sure why that happens. But yeah, now let's talk a bit about the differences between them other than that little thing. So the file size for this model is 10 kilobytes, which is pretty good for an animated block model. And then this one is 19 kilobytes, so almost double that, but that's still small enough that it really doesn't matter. And that's really the thing. You have to decide between whether you want the speed or the efficiency. Obviously with the We Are the Rangers map, there was a lot of animals and a lot of command blocks going on at the same time. So I decided in the end it would be easier to go for manually done models than risk having to do it all over again, because it just wasn't efficient enough. Very quickly, if you're wondering why the blackness isn't showing for these different elements, it's because I've actually used leaves for these models, which do have the full transparency support. So if you want to block for your block models that actually support sort of animation, then use leaves is probably a good tip. But let's have a look at them using gold ore and iron ore, which obviously don't have that same transparency support. So you can pretty much easily tell which one's which. This is the one with the automatic generation. You can see the whole model is animated, and this is the manually done one where only the arms and legs are done. Ignore the fact that the face is blacked out. That's just because of the transparency. There was nothing there. It's part of the hat layer. Now, since you've been able to sort of sit through all this long talking and tutorial, we may as well do something fun with our newly animated block models. So we're going to create a very quick sort of custom mob very quickly. So we're going to do scored objectives add. I'm going to call it is moving of type dummy, and then we're going to do scoreboard players set e name equals Sam, and then is moving 1, and then put a chain command block is moving 0 if it has the following motion arguments, so 0, 0.0, 0, 0.0, 0.0, and then entity data of name equals Sam. If it has a score of is moving min equals 1, then we need to do armor items, and we need to set the spruce leaves, so ID leaves damage 1, and then actually we'll just copy that other command, damage 0, so we'll just remove that, and if it is equal to 0, then it'll have the other thing. Okay, so let's just check, always active. So now if I do summon zombie, actually we're also going to need a command to make it invisible real quick. Effect e name equals Sam, invisibility 1 true. Okay, so now we just have to do slash summon zombie at these coordinates, custom name Sam and silent 1b, just so it isn't annoying. And let's do a few of those, and here we have our very own army of miniature Sams. And I'll try and leave a world download to this as well, so you can have a play around with these animated mini-me's. It'll be interesting to see what it looks like if I go into survival. Oh my god. Oh no. Well, anyway, I know all the examples I used here were just like things like legs and arms moving, but you can do a lot more with animated models than just doing legs and arms. Vanilla Burp has a series on her channel where she does these animated block models for a series called How It's Made. I'll leave a link to that video because that's pretty cool, and it's a cool example of what you can do with animated textures, or animated models rather. But yeah, that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next episode of Modeling Minecraft. Bye for now.